My guest today is special effects artist Lee Romaire, and for over 25 years, he has contributed to War of the Worlds, The Dictator, Five Nights at Freddy's attractions for Star Wars, Secret Life of Pets, and Disneyland's Abraham Lincoln, and some viral red carpet moments. He is best known today for designing advanced animatronic creatures for Disney World and Universal Studios' Epic Universe, and also Del Toro's Frankenstein marks his powerful return to film. Now, working with legendary sculptor Mike Lee, I should say Mike Hill is who I should say, as Lee and his team created everything from mauled sheep and period accurate dogs to a brutally realistic Bastion Husky drawn by Del Toro himself. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome special effects artist Lee Romaire to the show. Welcome, Lee.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
I am excited to speak with you today because I spent time watching the film Frankenstein. But how did you become a special effects artist?
Mm. Well, to go way back, I grew up in Louisiana, and when I was a kid, I was very fascinated with things that looked realistic, and I was fascinated with monster movies, not necessarily kind of the gory things that was kind of a little after my time, but more like King Kong and the Ray Harryhausen movies that you would see on Sunday morning television after church, and those kind of things. And my parents took me to Disney World at a very young age, so I was always interested in those environments. The Jungle Cruise, Pirates of the Caribbean, things like that really fascinated me. So that's kind of where it all began for me.
So, you're a special effects artist. So, did you get into sculpting first, or was it more tech with things like
Oh,
animatronics?
right. To go back again. I was kind of into taxidermy at a very young age. So someone who worked for my dad, did taxidermy as a hobby. And in Louisiana, it's the sportsman's paradise. So you go to someone's house, and there was always a deer head on the wall or a duck, something like that. So I would study it. There was particularly a restaurant called the Harbor Seafood that my parents would take me to, and they had fish all over the wall, and they even had these cases with little frogs playing pool and all this kind of crazy stuff. So I would get up from the table, and I'd go walk around and look at everything and study it. And so this guy did taxidermy as a hobby, and he showed me how to mount a crawfish, and I was probably 8 years old. So he showed me that, and he had this mail order course. Back then, it was mail order. You find something in the back of a magazine and you order it. So there was a mail order taxidermy course, and he gave me those books. And I studied them and read them and learned. I taught myself how to do it. So by the time I was 10 or 11, people were bringing me things in the neighborhood to do, and I had a little business, and I did that up until college. Actually, people were playing football, and I was doing taxidermy in my shop. So that kind of turned into jumped to college. I went for advertising as a creative copywriter, art director kind of thing. I did that for about 10 years. Made a decision that I wanted to be, one day I just made a decision I want to be a special effects makeup artist in Hollywood. Um, I don't know where it came from, but I guess it was just I was not satisfied with what I was currently doing. So I learned to sculpt. I went to a convention. Once I made that decision, things kind of happened really fast. I was in a bookstore, and I found this makeup artist magazine, and in it there was a convention coming up, a trade show in Los Angeles. So I booked it. I went to the trade show, and I met a bunch of people, and one of the people I met was Dick Smith. And Dick Smith is a famous, probably call him the Godfather of makeup. He did Linda Blair's makeup in The Exorcist. He did Marlon Brando's makeup in The Godfather. Just these iconic, famous things that he was At that point, he was retired and he was starting to teach people. So he took me kind of under his wing, and I studied underneath him and gained a lot of knowledge from that and practiced my sculpting. And then I was able to probably 20 months, 2 years later, I was able to move to Hollywood and I started getting work. So that's how it happened. Um, you know, the short story. Yes. So yeah. So, there it is.
That is really cool. And I mean, because I mean, making the decision to say this is what I want to do and go out and do it. Of course, you pick you pick a career that is probably like what, less than 1% of the population.
Oh yeah, much.
But you kind of you had the foundation already. Now, what kind of work did you do for Disney World and Universal Studios Epic Universe?
So I when I first started in Hollywood, I was working for other studios, and I worked for we did makeup work and for I was sculptor, TV shows and movies and things like that. And I started my own studio probably 3 or 4 years later. But one of the first clients I had was Disney Imagineering. A friend of mine worked there, and they started working on the first electric. They sort of wanted to electrify all of their animatronic figures. So that was because that was the future. Animatronic figures, like, going back to the days of It's a Small World and Tiki Room, and that's all either hydraulic, which is fluid driven, or pneumatic, which is air driven. They believe the future was electric, so electric motors. Um, so they were working on that first project, and it was ahead. And so we did several iterations, and they would call me, and I would come and sculpt, this, and I would, get the hair and all that looking good. And so, but it came to time that where they actually were going to use that technology in the park, and Abraham Lincoln was up for renewal. So Abraham Lincoln is the first audio animatronic that Walt Disney ever did. He was very involved in it. So it was a huge honor to be able to actually kind of help take that to the next level. So I was able to actually sculpt the head, and I convinced them to let me paint it and do the hair. And we came up with a lot of innovative techniques for that. So that became that became how I got into that world. And I saw a need. We do all these really cool things for the movies, in detail and realism. And I was like, okay, the theme park world really needs this right now. So I put all of my effort into kind of bringing all of that to the theme park world, through, the look first, then the animatronics. I knew a lot of people did mechanizations and things like that, and mechanics that were really amazing. So I brought all that into the theme park world in my business, and it kind of took off. So
So was Abraham Lincoln, was that part of Hall of Presidents?
no, Abraham Lincoln was by himself at first. So he was at, I think Walt Disney did that for one of the World's Fairs. And he was so smart. He like did all these attractions for the World's Fair. Like, I think A Small World was one of them, and Abraham Lincoln was another one, and I can't remember the other two. But he brought those back. They were sponsored by a big corporation, and he brought those back to Disneyland. And that was the beginning of all the audio animatronic, the higher level audio animatronics that you see in the park today. So he had his he Walt Abraham Lincoln has his own show at Disneyland, and then in Walt Disney World in Florida, it's the Hall of Presidents. It's all of them, you know.
Well, is the Hall of Presidents, are they electric, fluid, or pneumatic?
They are hydraulic at this point. The newer parts, like the newer presidents that come along, they're electric.
So when you're sculpting somebody famous, we see like maybe a new wax figure comes out every year, and and then sometimes they get it right, sometimes they don't get it right. So what's the biggest challenge in recreating a famous face.
I would say, bringing you want to like bring that feeling that that person gives you. Um, bringing life to it is the hardest part. There are a lot of people who can sculpt. Getting the likeness is very difficult. But bringing that life to somebody, like what is that little spark that that makes people become alive, and hitting that is really tough. Mike Hill, who again, he just won the Oscar for Frankenstein. He's like one of the best in the world at that, for sure. He's amazing as far as a likeness sculptor.
Yeah, we're going to get into Frankenstein here in a moment, but I know that at Disney World, everybody loves the Country Bear Jamboree,
Mhm.
and you worked on the MC of the show, the bear named Henry.
I worked
Uh,
on all of them. Yeah,
you worked on all of them. So with
yeah.
with Henry, was that a restoration back in 2011?
Yeah, so that I loved the Country Bears as a kid, and once Lincoln happened, I started getting calls from different divisions of Disney, asking to help on different things, pirates and presidents and birds, and but one was the Country Bears, and so I was like, absolutely, I want to do it. And yeah, that was a refresh. It started out a much bigger project, and I actually, to show them like what I thought a country bear could look like, I actually built a country bear myself, in my studio. I paid for it myself, and I showed it to them. I'm like, okay, here's what we can make it look like. We can make it look much better, but keep it exactly like the Mark Davis drawings that he envisioned back in the day, because those, they didn't have the money, believe it or not. Disney didn't have the money to make it like they really wanted it. So, we carefully, the creative director knew Blaine Gibson, who sculpted the bears, and, he kind of got his blessing on what we were thinking about doing the bears. So we got to actually redo the look of each bear, it was 18 characters. Well, three, let's see, I think it's 15 bears, I think, and then three, the moose and the buffalo and the deer on the wall, and then the little raccoon that comes out of the hat. So we redid all of them, and that was really cool. It was grueling. It was tough, but I'm glad I was able to do that. That was, I used to love that as a kid, and I actually got to get on the stage with the bears and learn all about how that thing worked. So that was really neat.
I mean, what is your emotion when you have the opportunity to work with some of the most iconic Disney attractions? And here you are, you've seen them as a kid, but now you became hands-on. And if it's fixing them or restoring them, bringing them back to life or whatever, I mean, what is that feeling like?
It's sort of, there's a lot of, for me, like a reverence to, kind of make sure we're doing it the right way. I mean, I don't have, there's usually a creative director involved, and they make the main decisions, but I try to help as much as I can and try to, keep everything on track as to what it should be, and not go overboard. I mean, on Country Bears, there was a couple bears that I thought went overboard a little bit, changing colors and things like that. But again, I wasn't in charge. But generally, I think it was a great job. And then, we just did another iconic thing for Disneyland, which was the helping restore the Tiki Room. So we got to do a lot of birds and did all the perches and things like that, help with that. So that, again, that was really neat, because it was funny to actually get in and take some of those birds that have been up there for since, I mean, the mid 50s, and you would take them and clean them and wring them out, and a gallon of water in a little bird this big would be just black with soot, from years and years of just being up there, so probably had some cigarette smoke from Walt Disney in it. But anyway, but that was really cool to actually do that, because that was another one of my favorites as a kid.
You know what my favorite attraction is the Haunted Mansion. So
Yes,
did you work within that attraction?
that's the one thing that I haven't worked on yet. So
To me, it would be kind of well. For me, it looks like it would be difficult because everything has to appear kind of cool in the dark.
yeah, and they did some really innovative stuff. They had translucent, plastic skins, or they had, or it's got a bit of a glow to it when you hit it with a certain light. So that is all like really amazingly well thought out. How they achieved all of that. So yeah,
So,
yeah, that's maybe one day we'll see.
well, so you did this, so you've done a ton of work for Disney World, Disneyland. What about Universal Studios Epic Universe?
So, as you get more modern with the IP things like Star Wars or some of these other things, it becomes harder to talk about because they're very serious about maintaining the NDAs. So I can't say what we did specifically on those, but we touched every single land, and we just won 4 Thea Awards as well for that, which is the themed entertainment award, with the other vendors who worked on that. But we did some of the most. I would say we did 22 different characters at Epic Universe, and we some of the most sophisticated that are in the park we were able to work on. Some that are very alive, and some that actually walk around, and interact with visitors. So, yeah, it really some of the best work we've ever done. Some of the hardest as well.
Wow. Now I know that one of the strangest red carpet fashion statements was Frank Ocean at the Met
Mhm.
Gala, but
Yeah.
he had an animatronic baby named Cody back in 2021. And I understand that you worked on that. How did that strange collaboration happen?
So Frank, a friend of mine, introduced us to the project, and Frank opened a jewelry store in New York. So he wanted this baby made for a display window, and the baby's supposed to be, kind of reaching up in the air and kind of grabbing for butterflies, and the butterflies were going to be, I think, visuals on the back of the wall, like digital images, and because he has butterflies are part of the jewelry line. So we built the baby, and the baby was slated to go to New York to the store. So it was, standing up, and it had all the mechanical motors, and all the guts were underneath the stage. And he called up one day, and they said, he wants to walk down the red carpet with this thing at the Met Gala. What can you do? And it was weeks away. So, can you? And so we had thought about it, and like, okay, we have to get everything that's on the outside right now and stick it on the inside of the baby. So, one of my great, amazing mechanical designers figured out a way to do it, and we got it all self-contained. And he had a little button. The baby had a little button on his bottom of his foot to turn him on, and then another button to make him wave and interact. Um, so that we rehearsed it, got out, and then we sent a video to Frank, and we sent the baby to Frank, and like, okay, here's what you do when you get out. And I sent one of my guys over. We're gonna hand you the baby. We're gonna turn it on. You're gonna walk down the carpet. So he did it, and it was really great because Frank immediately picked up on how to interact with this mechanical thing that was just kind of running through a loop. So he talked to it, and it made everybody think that it was live, and it was um, responding to Frank. It was really, really cool. And the baby would wave to the audience, and so it really worked. I mean, it was definitely a standout moment for the Met Gala that year. So I'm really, really proud of that work.
I'm surprised that a lot of other celebrities haven't contacted you to create something in that vein.
Well, I wouldn't say that, but it just hasn't happened yet. Hasn't the deal hasn't been struck. But
everybody's looking to break the internet, so I'm surprised they haven't been knocking your door down for something.
yes, yeah, they're doing a lot of it now. But that that whole that was all Frank's vision. I mean, the look of the baby, which is it was very unusual, like very. It was supposed to be somewhat mechanical. Supposed to be. It was green, and he had little braces for some reason. But that was all Frank's vision of how that should go. But he's a great person to work with. He's very creative, and we love working with creative people like that.
Well, that
So
is so cool. Well, now I understand that you came back to film with Del Toro's Frankenstein. So, what's the difference between creating for theme parks versus special effects props for film?
the difference is longevity mostly. So when you do something for a film, or whether it's a makeup or a puppet or whatever, it only has to last long enough for the shoot. So if it's a makeup, it has to last a day, and then you have another set that you put on. If it's a animatronic puppet, it just has to last. It has to look good, and you for the shoot, and you can go in and fix it overnight, or you can brush its hair and clean it up and make it look great for each shot. For a theme park animatronic, like let's say a Pirates of the Caribbean, that thing has to run 16, 11, 12, 13, 14 hours a day. It's like building a car. So it's a level of engineering and design that you don't have to have, and forethought that you don't have to have in a movie type animatronic or creation. So, that prompted me to create a whole engineering team. We have a full-time staff of engineers that go in and do hazard analysis, and they do all kind of analysis on our and um, run simulations in the computer, and everything we design now is in the computer, and the parts are built through CNC, and they all come together. It's really fascinating, but it's a lot more time consuming. Something that would take a couple months to build, and the movies takes a couple years in for theme park. So
Well,
yeah,
that would make sense because, like you said, here you are messing around with a tiki bird, and you're cleaning it up, and like you
yeah,
said, you've got a few decades of dirt to remove, but they have to last. And
yes.
but then you had Mike Hill, who, like you said, just won the Oscar for Best Makeup and Hair for Frankenstein. The film won 4 Oscars this past Sunday. How did Mike bring you in to work on Frankenstein?
So I've been knowing Mike for a long time. He's like I said, he's an amazing sculptor and artist, and he is friends with Guillermo, and he actually worked on The Shape of Water with Guillermo as well. So which also won an Oscar, I think, not several years ago. But so Mike, he Guillermo tasked Mike to create the creature for the movie, and Mike is there's no one better to do this than Mike, because Mike is a universal monster freak. He loves it. He's very, very, very passionate about the subject. So he's perfect. Him and Guillermo are a perfect combination for this. And because Guillermo's also a monster freak. So, um, he was tasked with doing all of these things in the movie, like all of the body parts that were in the lab, all the animals, all the this and that, the war scenes, and he couldn't do all of it because he didn't have a big studio and with a big crew. So what he did was he called people he knew to do different parts. And for me, because I'm Mr. Taxidermy, the dead animal guy of Hollywood. So he called me up and said, "Can you do these?" And I'm like, "Of course, I would love to do that." Um, it's a relatively I shouldn't. It's less complicated than what we normally work on, but it does require a great deal of artistry. So yeah, so I definitely took it on.
Well, you created the sheep, The dogs.
Right.
Um, for
Yeah.
you, what were some of the actual challenges in creating common animals to look real on film?
Well, we have a lot of experience with it. The challenge on that movie was getting started. Number one was tough because the deadlines never changed. We needed this time, and it was just taking a long time to get rolling. But luckily, the production team did a lot of research ahead of time, and they wanted like period looking sheep and period looking dogs. So the sled dogs were not huskies; um, they were called sled dogs, I guess, and they were just kind of a breed that almost looks more like a sort of wolfy coyote looking dog. And so they had actually got the real animals that they were using as well. And it's funny about doing animals, like you can, like if you do an animal like if you have to do a baby, they will grow during your, while you're getting ready for the movie, they'll actually grow, and it becomes very difficult. But these, they were dead, and they had the animals. So we had a bunch of pictures of animals, and we just matched them as best we could, not being able to be with them because they were in Canada. Lots of photographs and measurements and things like that. And then became the, well, we kind of want them to be mauled a bit. So it's like, okay, what do you want? Because we don't really do that kind of gory stuff that much anymore. But Guillermo, of course, had ideas how he wanted it, and I was kind of throwing in ideas, and one of them had to have their head bashed in. So it's like, okay, what does that mean? That could be a million different things. And so I got this little drawing from Guillermo. Here it is. And it's very simple. It's very elegant, but we just basically copied it and made that for the film. Another one, I was like, let's twist its head around like the Linda Blair and The Exorcist. So we did that kind of thing. So yeah, so it was just doing that and then making them, and then once you make them, it's important to make them a little dirty. So a lot of people don't realize that, but you have to, once you make something and make it beautiful and pristine, then you have to mess it up a little bit, because that's what real life is. Real life is not perfectly groomed and combed. It's got a little dirty on the bottom of its feet and things like that. It's those little details that make things realistic.
Well, you bring something up about creating animals as to make it correct for the period. What's the actual difference between, let's say, sheep in the 19th century versus today?
It was just it was a particular type of sheep that they raised. I mean, there was a particular type of sheep. Over the years, things have been bred into sheep, and you've got multiple different lines of sheep, but back then there was a specific time in that specific world that made sense. So and they went back and they looked at photographs and they read things and determined what that was, and using old paintings and all kind of neat stuff like that. So I
Yeah.
mean, we made the sheep. The sheep are basically made out of sheep's. Well, all the animals had mostly fake fur on them, but the sheep they were very kind of long hair. So we bought some uh, sheepskin bath mats or sheepskin whatever off of eBay, and that's what the sheep are made out of. So yeah.
Why, and they look authentic because everything in that film looked
Oh
absolutely real. And it's so
yeah,
funny because, you bring up, you don't do a whole lot of gore. And I had a late friend of mine, Herschel Gordon Lewis, who was called the Godfather of Gore, did all those old campy films back in the day.
yeah,
And I asked him, I go, what was the whole deal with the gore? And he said, well, I used to watch Westerns back in the day, and if a guy got shot, nobody bled.
right.
And so he was like, we got to make them bleed. And so, of course, his films kept getting, you know, gorier and gorier, not like they are today, but
Yeah.
is creating gore difficult?
Well, I mean, I think there was a point when I mean, yes, it's all kind of a craft, like blood. When blood sits on for example, like fake blood doesn't sit on the skin very well, so you have to do a certain thing to get it to look correct. The blood color is important. I mean, this is something that Dick Smith was very into as well. Dick Smith, because like when he was, really doing these famous movies like The Godfather, the level of violence that Coppola wanted in that, he wanted a realistic depiction of violence. So, all of those things, the blood had to be the right colors and this and that. And bloods change color when they sit for a while. And, you have to know all that stuff. You have to know what it looks like. When I was first starting in the special effects business, there was a lot of autopsy stuff. So I worked on that 6 Feet Under show, and they were showing a lot of doctor shows, and I have friends who have made their whole career off of doing bodies like that they're doing operations on or this and that, and they do a really great job at making things look realistic. Like when I started my own studio, I was like, I don't want to do that because it's already being done really well. You know, Superhero suits. That's another thing that a lot of people went into because of the this explosion of superhero movies. That's not something I want to do because there were already, 4 or 5 different companies doing a really amazing job at that. So the theme park is just kind of my little niche that I went into.
Well, what I think is really cool though is by being in a niche for theme parks, you're constantly working.
Mm-hmm.
So, with film comes, film goes, there may be downtime, but with you, you're able to continue to master the craft on a regular basis. And when you bring up the whole body thing, like with all of these medical shows and things of that sort, it almost seems like you have to have a small degree in pathology.
Yeah, I mean, these people really know. I mean, they do. The ones that are really good study all of it and understand what it looks like. Well, theme parks do have ups and downs. They go through cycles of building. Right now, there's a cycle up of building with Disney and Universal, but it gets slow. But I mean, if you are smart and careful, you also help with restorations and you help with other things. And diversification is always in any business like what we're in. Diversification is super important. So
Hey,
a bit of theme, a little movie work here, a little helping this musician with this. It all like helps.
well, I think the cool thing about the Oscars this year is it was really a breakthrough for the horror genre. And not just Frankenstein, but even for Sinners and maybe a few other films, which to me, horror was always kind of shoved off to the side. That was some like little
Weapon.
kid
Yeah,
niche for the most part, but it's
yeah,
cinematic now.
yeah, yeah. Well, but it people are going to see it. So I mean, people want to see that. So I mean, I guess it does have to be recognized, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for you, when you were working on all the animals for Frankenstein, what was the timeline on that?
We had about 4 months, so which is a very generous, I would say these days. That's a very generous amount of time. So to do something like that.
Wow. So here you are, a special effects artist. Is there something that you haven't done yet that you would love to do now?
Yeah, I think I'm going to, I don't think I know. I'm going to start working on our, things that we own. We do a lot of work for, these other companies. Then they make a lot of money off of it, but we don't own it. And we're also kind of creating someone else's vision. So I'm kind of starting a new company that we're going to be creating our own IP and um, with our own vision, and that'll be a side company. But you know, I've done all these little side projects. Like I've um, just recently, I went to Mardi Gras, and I'm part of a Mardi Gras crew in Louisiana, my home state, and you know, so I made some things for that for the for my crew for the ball of in Mardi Gras, and that was a lot of fun. We got to be very creative, um, and you know, so I'm like, God, I really would like to do more of this stuff where we are creating the vision and we're implementing the vision, you know, in the way we can. So. And that's a little. That sounds a little cryptic. What I want to do, but you know, I'm not ready to reveal a lot of it yet.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're in an area where you kind of got to keep things close to the chest and not reveal
Right.
things.
Right.
So, no, I
Right.
get it. I
Yeah,
get
I'm
it.
not. I don't like to promote things before they're actually um, uh, actually created. A lot of people do. I don't.
No, I get it. I get it. And I mean, is there any type of well-known film franchise out there that you would love to be a part of?
Nah, not really. Um, you know, I really am grateful and appreciate the things that I've been asked to work on, but there's not like a thing that I you know, I have their Gremlin. They're gonna redo Gremlins, and I have friends who are just chomping at the bit to be able to work on that. And I think you know our studio would probably be perfect to do all that because they're gonna be doing you know puppets, animatronics. But if I didn't work on it, it wouldn't matter to me at all. I mean, I enjoy like the actual work and working with creative people. That's the part that I like. I'm not into the awards. I'm not into even, sometimes I don't even see the movie after. I mean, I didn't, like there's some films I've done years ago that I haven't even really seen yet. So
That's really kind of funny. I mean, is there
yeah.
anything particular that you're working on now that you could actually talk about?
Well, we're in the process of negotiating some really cool things that we're going to be working on over the next couple of years. Things that, again, it's sort of a, I'll just say it's a legacy kind of attraction that's been around for a long time that we might be able to be helping redo. So it's something that is really neat. Had a big influence on my childhood. Um, or young adulthood, I should say. Um, so, yes, some neat
Well,
stuff.
you're living the dream, Lee.
That's what I hear. I don't know. Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
you know, it's so funny because I had interviewed uh, stunt coordinator Thomas Lober yesterday, who doubled for Oscar Isaac in Frankenstein. So had double Frankensteins this week, which is very, very cool. But I just love the work that you have done and continue to do. And you know what, for all of us who go to Disneyland and Disney World, now I'm going to look at it completely different when I go, and I'm thinking, Lee's hand touched that.
yes, yes, or at least my crew. You know, at least, yeah,
Well, I love that. And ladies and gentlemen, for over 25 years, Lee Romaire has contributed to things like War of the Worlds, The Dictator, even Five Nights at Freddy's, attractions for Star Wars, as well as Secret Life of Pets, Disneyland's Abraham Lincoln. When I should say Disneyland and Disney Worlds, most of everything in those parks have been touched by Lee Romaire, as well as some of those viral red carpet moments, like we mentioned with Frank Ocean. But he also came back to film when Guillermo del Toro handed him a drawing to recreate the sheep, dogs, and wolves in the blockbuster hit Frankenstein, focusing on the realism of the animals. And yes, they look real. And I've seen this film, and it is, of course, we all talk about the incredible cinematography. And, well, he was had hands on creating some of those epic portions of that incredible film. And I want to thank you, Lee, for sharing your career highlights and more, as well as the work you have done on Frankenstein. And congratulations to the 4 Oscars that were won for that film this past Sunday. And can't wait to see what you do next.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun.
You're very, very welcome. And ladies and gentlemen, you can watch or listen to all of the Bond on Cinema interviews at bondoncinema.com. Check out our Prime show, our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, iTunes, and more. And remember, you'll either see me at the movies or from the red carpet.